What's up you guys, the Curious Owl here, and today I will be sharing with you guys my March wrap-up. So March of 2021 was better than my February wrap-up in terms of the fact that I did actually finish more books in the month than I had not finished, but I still didn't read very much in terms of like what my normal average is every month, but let's get into it. So first off, I read 5 books but finished 4. And I read a total of 1,057 pages, listened to a total of 2 hours, 36 minutes, and 52 seconds worth of audiobooks. I had 2 books that I had read and finished that were physical copies, 1 ebook copy, and 1 audiobook copy. Only one of the books I read this month was a personal pick. It was something that was from my own personal library, and the other 3 were borrowed from the library. As far as star ratings, I did have 1 5-star, 1 4-star, 2 3-stars, no 2 stars, no 1 stars, and I did actually end up DNFing 1 book, but it actually was only because I ran out of time on my library copy and I had to give it back. So it wasn't because it was bad, I ran out of time and I haven't picked it up since. The first book that I listened to this month was Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. I listened to the audiobook of this and gave it 3 stars. I have read a couple Jacqueline Woodson books in the past and I have really liked her kind of vignette style writing, and especially for the fact that her books are so very short but very impactful. This one was more of a memoir than her other books had been because it talked a lot about her growing up and the lessons that she basically had learned over the course of her life from being just a black girl living in Brooklyn and having to deal with family issues and racist issues and societal issues all while growing up, and I think the 70s and 80s. Now, I just really don't think that with this audiobook I got as much from it as I think I would have if I read it physically, because the other Jacqueline Woodson books I have read were both physical and I enjoyed them so much, but I think that with this one I just really needed to read the physical book to really enjoy it. So I only gave it 3 stars because I wasn't as invested in it as I think I would have been. The second book I read was Macabre by Stephen King. This was part of my Stephen King reading series. This was his first nonfiction book. I have a review that you can actually go watch of this. I gave it 3 stars because I felt like overall it was truthfully a love letter to the horror genre, which was what it was about. It was basically looking and dissecting different aspects of horror in terms of movies, TV shows, and books, and talking about things like the character archetypes, the plot structures, the tropes that would be used in the various forms of media. But I felt like that there was so much of this book that could have been cut down and or put together because a lot of it was just repeating the same things over and over and over again, and a lot of it I thought that would have been better if it was to remain the same length would have been to include more of Stephen King's actual opinions on it, because he did talk about his experiences with these kinds of movies and books and TV shows and had some opinions here and there, especially when it did come to like what he thought was a good plot thing or a good character archetype or what have you. But I would have liked to have seen him talk about the books and movies he spoke about more on an individual basis and give his overall thoughts of those particular movies by themselves, because that I think would have been so much more for me as somebody that is not well versed in the horror genre. I would have liked to have somebody I trusted basically talk about a horror movie, for instance, and give me the lowdown on what exactly they like about it, what exactly about that particular movie in these different areas is good to them, and then on top of it, the experience that they have with that movie when they saw it for the first time, when they, watched it for the 10th time, and what were things that they started to learn over the course of the rewatches of it, that kind of thing. And I didn't really get a lot of that, so I just feel like that this book was too long for what it was and just very repetitive a lot of time. The next book that I read, which was my only 5-star read for the month, was This Is My America by something Johnson. I don't remember her name, but this is probably going to be my top 10 of 2021 so far because this book was amazing. I had heard very little about this book in terms of its making its rounds on BookTube, but it sounded so good to me that I had to pick it up, and I'm so happy that I did, because this, I think, touches on a very specific part of the issues that Black people have in American society that I do not think it's touched on at all, and that is when a Black person is wrongfully accused of a crime and they are held in jail for so long, and they're especially given like a death sentence, and nobody seems to advocate for that person to prove that they were innocent. And that's pretty much the exact synopsis of the story. You have a young teenage girl whose father is already in prison, is on death row. She's been sending letters since he was arrested when she was about 12 years old to find somebody to fight for him and prove that he was innocent, because she believes that he was innocent. And at the same time, you have this girl from her school that is found murdered, and because her brother was one of the last people to talk to her, one of the last people to see her, and because of the fact that his father is already in prison for supposedly murdering somebody, they automatically think that he is the person that killed her, and it goes on the run, and she has to try to prove that he was not the one that killed this girl. And this whole history of repeating itself aspect, again, I think is something that does not get touched on when it comes to the Black experience in America. And I think also, like I said, specifically looking at the innocence factor and proving innocence before guiltiness is never an option that is given to Black people, unfortunately. Or if it is, it's very, 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 very rare, because more often than not, unfortunately, when Black people are accused of crimes, they're just automatically arrested, and there is no real sense of proving innocence before guiltiness. And unfortunately, this book really highlights that, but it is so much more than that. I felt like this book was just so much in terms of talking about family and relying on family and trusting yourself and trusting your gut and your intuition and standing up for yourself and for the people you care about. It just has so many good messages about it that I just fell in love with it. And like I said, it's probably going to be one of my top 10 so far of 2021, because it just was such an impactful story that it is something that's going to last with me for, I think, quite some time. The next book I read was actually a novella, and that was Memento by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is book 2.5 of the Illuminae files, and this basically it's also kind of a prequel, because what it does is it sets up exactly what happened before the events of Illuminae. It sets up exactly what happened to Aiden, who is the AI that is basically ruining a lot of the stuff happening in Illuminae, and kind of sets us off on this whole storyline, how he gets corrupted and what biotech is doing in terms of starting this whole thing, this whole chain reaction of stuff to happen. And I really liked it. I wish that it just was its own thing. I would have loved to have seen all of this stuff from Aiden's perspective, but the thing is like with Illuminae, you see everything from everybody's perspective, because the entirety of the Illuminae files is built on case files, transcript, various notes from Aiden if he's involved with it, and on all these things. And so you do get to see his perspective, but I almost wish we would have seen more, but there's only so much you can tell leading up to how Illuminae starts, because everything that happens before Illuminae starts happens in a very short amount of time. And so it was frustrating to see that there wasn't much more, but I really did like what there was, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. And then the last book that I ended up actually having to DNF, again because I ran out of time on my library copy of it, was actually Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, the third and final book in the Illuminae files. I honestly don't even remember much of what was happening in Obsidio by this point. This book basically is the culminating end. It brings together the characters that are in Illuminae and the characters that were in the second book, Gemina, and it's essentially the end of this story where they are revolutionizing the entirety of their space journey, because they're trying to go after the people who started all of this, which is biotech. I love this series a lot. I just wish I had had the time to finish it, and I didn't, so sucks to suck, I guess. But those are all the books I ended up reading in March. Again, not very many because I was on my break and was very much in a slump by that point. I think that after I especially had DNF Obsidio was when I was really getting stressed out, because it was getting into April, and April was a really busy month for me. I had a lot of things happening, and in the process of moving back to my parents' house, and I had a lot of things in general going on in April. I was in a wedding at the end of the month, and like I said, we were moving. I was having to make a bunch of plans and stuff, and it was a really stressful month. And so I think that once I finished Obsidio, I had taken an unintended slight break in my reading until probably about halfway through April, and then I started picking up stuff sparingly. Like, I think I only read maybe 3 books in the entirety of April, but what I did read in April was pretty okay. So I kind of like got myself out of the reading slump I was in since about February. So anyway, that's all I have to say about March. Let me know what you guys ended up reading in the month of March, or what you've been reading recently. If you have any thoughts on the books that I have mentioned in this video, please let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them, whether you loved them or you hated them. Either way, I would love to know. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, and you'd like to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe, become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all you guys in my next video. Bye guys!